Welcome in everyone to a live Seahawks Aftermath. I'm your host, Bryce Coots, and tonight we're going to be diving into the Seahawks victory over the Indianapolis Colts yesterday, 18-6, in a game I think a lot of us expected to go a lot differently when we woke up Sunday morning and we're getting ready for that game. And so I took last night, instead of doing a instant reaction show, I took the night off to kind of go through that game, kind of go through it, process how I was feeling about that game, and went back and rewatched a couple versions of it now, a couple versions of the All 22. And there's some things that I feel better about, and there's some things that are still quite concerning to me, especially with the remaining three opponents and the hope of a long playoff run for this team. So we'll get into all of those and all of those discussion topics soon. But before we do, and if you guys haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, click that notification button so you never miss an episode, like the videos, comment on the videos, share them with your friends that are fellow Seahawk fans. Keep helping me grow this community. We've passed 1,500 subscribers. I'm trying to get up to 2,000 before the end of this NFL season. So any help with that is greatly appreciated, and I appreciate everybody that has already come and joined this great community here that we built over at the Hawk's Eye. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into the discussion right after this.
Inside the 15, looks, throws, fires to the end zone, ball is caught, touchdown, Seahawks! Dunking it over the bar is Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's on the run, Lynch, 40, pushes the man, 35, look at him go! He's down to 20, 15, he could go! He is gonna go! Touchdown, Seahawks! Oh my word! A 67-yard run!
All right, everyone. So let's kind of get into some of these initial updates from today. So obviously, Mike McDonald did a show on 710. He had his Monday press conference. A couple things came out of that. Obviously, Charles Cross is dealing with a hamstring injury on that last second field goal by Jason Myers. They're hoping to have him back, it sounds like, for Thursday. I'm not as optimistic, as we know hamstrings can be a real finicky thing to deal with, and especially going up against the likes of Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk. That can make things definitely difficult for Charles Cross this Thursday night on such a short week. So we'll see how that goes out through the week. But overall, it sounds like we came out pretty healthy in that game. But there were definitely some things I could sense from Mike McDonald in both of his shows and even his last night post-game press conference of just a little bit of frustration with this offense and the way that this offense is trending right now. Because if you look over the last 4 to 5 weeks here, we'll go back to the Rams game, and you look at the Rams game, and the Seahawks scored 9 points in that first half, no touchdowns, just field goals. And then you go to the Titans game, and that's kind of the outlier in this group. And the Titans, as we know, are not a very good football team. And we were able to put up 13 points in that half. But then you come back to the Minnesota Vikings game, and this Seahawks offense has, again, put up 6 points. It's 13 on the box score, but that's contributing to the defense putting up 7 points, and Ernest Jones with his pick six, which we all know and love from that game. And then you come back to the Falcons game, and it's 9 points. And then again, you come back to this game, and it's 6 points. So the Seahawks offense hasn't functioned properly, really. And honestly, I would say in the first half functioned properly since the Commanders game or the Arizona Cardinals game at home. And that's a concerning trend going down this backstretch now and heading to a potential battle for first in the NFC and in the NFC West for that matter. And I can sense it in Mike McDonald, the frustration in the lack of, hey, we're not putting up touchdowns. We're kicking field goals. Okay, that's great. But we need touch. We need to have scores and sustain drives and be able to move. And third down yesterday, I think they were 2 of 13. Our third down efficiency hasn't been that great. And I know there's people that are going to be in the chat. We won. A win's a win. Yeah, I completely appreciate a win is a win. But if the goal is a win, that's the mindset, in my opinion, of a team that has been, kind of just mediocre for the last 10 years, 7 years of this franchise. Some of us are expecting this team to be more than just a win's a win. Like, we want this team to go and win Super Bowls and championships. And the way you do that is not by when a team is playing their 44-year-old quarterback on 4 days of practice, that you put that offensive performance together. And the team you're playing against, and I give Lou Amarello a lot of credit, they had missing 2 of their starting corners in that Indianapolis defensive backfield. And yes, they got away with a bunch of holding calls. Don't get me started with the refs and how, ineffective they were at points in this game of being consistent. But they stumped Clint Kubiak in this offense again for another first half. And it's the same recipe that the Vikings have shown, that the Rams have shown, that the Falcons have shown. And it's concerning when you look at that. And I know the pass defenses for these teams are above the bottom in the NFL and probably above the halfway mark in the NFL. They're all top 15 units. But this offense at one point was one of the most explosive in the NFL. And yes, it's great. We get it going in the second half, but that's not going to cut it against a team like the Rams this Thursday, where if we don't put together a good first half of offense, we may find ourselves down 21-0. And I don't know if this offense is built to come back and fully win a game that's 21-0 at the first half. So I could definitely feel some vibes from Mike in his press conferences about that. But, again, another thing when we look at this defense for this team, right? The defense for the Seattle Seahawks is a championship caliber defense, and we don't want to waste those. And it's just getting better now that Julian Love's getting back and he's getting more comfortable. And I'll be honest, I know a lot of people love Nicky Manwari. I thought the best player on the defense yesterday was Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy, and Mike McDonald alluded to it as well. Byron Murphy won that game almost on his own defensively. The amount of double teams and ways he stopped the run on the Colts and just collapsed the pocket a little bit on Rivers at different points. Like, he was a man possessed yesterday, and it was really great to see that, this player now is becoming a true dominant force in the NFL in this season. So, kudos to Byron Murphy. Nicky Manwari, again, fantastic game. I will say, though, defensively, if I had to pick one sore spot for me, Josh Jobe seems to be struggling a bit to me, and Reek Woolen seems to keep getting better each week. And I was surprised with how much Josh Jobe played over Reek in this game. And I just want to have a look here at the snap counts to make sure I'm going to get this right. But if I go off the snap counts in this game, Josh Jobe had 49 snaps and Tariq Woolen had 37. So he outsnapped him by over 10, which to me was quite surprising. And Josh Jobe's PFF score, take those with a grain of salt again, considering that they gave Byron Murphy a 48 grade in this game, which I still don't understand how that occurred, but they gave Josh Jobe a 36.7. Like, he was not good in this game, and that's concerning. And I think it might make this conversation this offseason about if we pay Reek Woolen that much more interesting if Reek keeps playing the way he has. It'll be definitely an interesting situation for the Hawks to deal with. But, when we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, again, this run game is the ugly for me out of this game. It is lethargic. It is just inconsistent. And I know a lot of folks are going to go and point, well, they put Jalen Sundell back in and you saw the run game fall off a cliff. I do think some of that is the Jalen Sundell effect. I think it's the effect of coming back off a knee injury, coming back and not having played for 4 games. But there's things scheme-wise I think that is kind of broken in this run game right now that just don't work. I think the constant rotation of running backs doesn't work. I think there's questions about K9 and Charbonnet if either one of them is the right running back to have in Seattle. And I know there's a few people out there that are ready to plant their flag that, it's all on K9 and K9's the main reason this, yeah, but there were times in this game where K9's trying to get even to his initial mark on his track, and there's guys in the backfield or pushing the offensive line backwards. And no matter what running back, unless you're Barry Sanders, aren't doing too well in that situation. And, I don't know if either one of those backs will be here next year. Maybe Charbonnet is because he has another year on his contract. K9, I think, is doing well, but I'm also interested in I'll give credit to one of our listeners and viewers and Amy Holmes on this, one of our moderators in the chat. Amy brought up something to me that was rather interesting. And I'm gonna do some digging into it and find out this whole Coach Polamalu having to leave the Seahawks for the remainder of the season. Going back and watching the press conference where Mike talked about it, I just wonder if there's something else going on there more than what most people assume with the personal matters, family related or health related. I wonder if they're saying it's he's taking a leave, but if it's not something about maybe a disagreement on how this running game should work because there's something going on that's just not right with this group, and it hasn't been all year. Like, realistically, if you look at this run game from where it was in the preseason when we were all so excited, seeing this running game just gash teams in the preseason to what we now have seen through these 15 weeks of the NFL season are night and day. They aren't even the same thing. And for those that are holding out hope that this is going to all of a sudden get fixed going into these last couple of weeks and into the playoffs, it's nice to think that way, but just from a coaching perspective, if you're struggling this much through 15 weeks and you haven't found the reason why, I don't know if there's a way you're going to figure it out in the last 4 weeks here, especially with the Rams, 3 weeks, Rams, Panthers, and 49ers. I don't know if you're going to figure that out, especially when the Rams and the 49ers have already played you once this year and have an idea of what you do already. It's a concerning trend because in January football, you got to be able to run the ball and you got to be able to run it effectively. And to run for what I think it was under 50 yards yesterday or just over it as a collective is rather concerning because our pass game feeds off of it with play action. And the one thing I've seen watching back the All-22, and it's been a few weeks now, our drop back pass game, if it's not the quick game and it's actually long developing routes or intermediate to long, it has problems. There are issues with guys being able to create separation, especially with Torrey Horton being out. Rashid Shaheed's now starting to come along, but there's scheme issues and conceptual issues with that, trying to do that deep down the field. And so this is where it's kind of going to be interesting to see what Clint Kubiak can do and John Benton and Rick Dennison and Otten and Jake Peets and this whole group to try and get this offense back on the tracks so that it can be effective and not having to say, hey, it'll take till halftime for us to figure this out. Like that's not sustainable in the NFL. And it's something that definitely is a bothersome fact for me. So let's, I see a lot of you guys are starting to comment in here, which is great. So, let's talk about what is wrong with the Seahawks offense, after seeing it for the last, few games now. Like if you go back and I look at this box score here from this game with the Seahawks and the Colts here, it's not a pretty box score. And that's one thing for me where when I look at, what this game represents, if we don't have Jason Myers, and by the way, Jason Myers is doing an outstanding job this year. Give him all the credits because I was worried about him coming out of training camp. When you look at this box score from this game, like Sam played a good game, 22 of 36, 271, 1 sack, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He had the one fumble that went out of bounds. But Zach Charbonnet running the ball, 8 carries, 31 yards, 3.9. Kenneth Walker, 9 carries, 17 yards, 1.9. Sam Darnold, 4 carries, 5 yards, 1.3. And then you had the one lonely jet sweep play to Shaheed there that just didn't work. But Seattle's team average for running the ball was the lowest it has been all season at 2.3 yards per carry. And they ran it 22 times. But in a game, again, where it's 16-18 and your two running backs combined for 17 carries, when if I go back a week ago in the same situation, I think Charbonnet had 13 and Ken had 11. So they alone made up 20 plus touches. It's one of those things where I'm just something is off with this offense. And I don't know what it is. And I hope Seattle figures it out soon. And they've got all of 2 days to figure it out before they play the Rams. It's a problem because, JSN went off. He had 7 catches for 113 yards, no touchdowns. But this was the thing I did like about the offense. I will say this. I did like this about the offense. You saw 5 catches from Shaheed, 5 catches from Kupp, 3 catches from Barner, 74 yards from Shaheed. Cooper Kupp had 46. Barner had 27. You saw some of these, weapons in the second, third level of this offense start making some more plays, which is good. It's just, why is it always taking till the second half of that really to pop and show up? So I don't know what's wrong. I'd love to figure it out, but this is for me where when I look at Clint Kubiak and all the buzz that's around Clint Kubiak, I start to really wonder if people are overvaluing Clint Kubiak in this offense. And the reason I say that is Clint Kubiak has never been in this situation. None of the offense he has coordinated before have ever been in a situation where they are the number one team potentially in the NFL or in the NFC and getting ready for a playoff run. When he was with Minnesota, the coach got fired at the end of the year, and that Minnesota team was awful. He goes to, Denver and takes over halfway through the year for a Nathaniel Hackett run Broncos team that was horrible. He is then, gone to New Orleans where they were nowhere near the playoffs last year. So he has never been in a situation where teams are really hard focusing on coming up with, game plans for a team that they expect to also see in the playoffs and how they're going to adjust and how they're going to take away his bread and butter. Because when you're a team that's not playing for the playoffs early on in a season because you're eliminated so quickly, like teams game plan a little bit differently. They don't take you this seriously the same way they would a team that is getting ready for the playoffs that they may potentially see. And he's got to find a way to elevate what he's good at. Like, there are things Clint Kubiak is very good with in his offense. The play action pass game is one of them. He is very good at coming up with play action pass concepts and getting guys open down the field off of play action. But how are you, elevating your quick game? How are you elevating your other concepts in pure drop back? There shouldn't be such a drop off from Sam Darnold as a quarterback from he's one of the best quarterbacks in play action, top 5 in the NFL, to being middle of the pack in just normal drop back. That's concerning. That's like, okay, why is there such a discrepancy in your offensive passing game? He was supposed to come in here and help fix this run game with John Benton and Rick Dennison, and haven't really seen it come to scope here yet and actually, see what it could look like if it fully functioned properly. And you had Robbie Oots out in this last game as a healthy scratch. Well, I don't know if Robbie Oots makes up, 3 yards per carry where you'd been roughly around the 5-yard mark the last 4 games. But is this a conversation where you look at, hey, do we put Olu back in at center and Robbie Oots isn't a healthy scratch again? Like, there's a lot of things that they're going to have to evaluate in these short days that they've got coming up here to try and figure this out, because Mike McDonald is not going to want to have to go in and go, hey, cool, so I got to keep the Rams to under 20 points in the first half because it's going to take my offense 2 quarters to figure out how to move the ball and get going. And I'll give credit here. Hawk blogger Brian Nimhauser, I watched his show today, and he brought up a really good point about Sam Darnold. And I've been thinking about it myself. I think they have put way too much in Sam's head right now about how to play the quarterback position. Okay, you need to start running more. Okay, you got to take sacks, but you can't take sacks. Protect the ball when you take a sack. Don't turn the ball over. Don't, maybe hold it that extra second. And Brian brought up a really good chart where he was talking about, time to throw and how Sam's time to throw has steadily gotten longer and longer in the season from where it was really quick in the beginning of the year. And part of that is teams are taking away the first read. So, okay, Clint, how are you going to scheme this open now? Stop relying on your first read in JSN because teams have figured that out. And this is something I talked about. What are you going to do when that starts to happen? How are you going to make Sam just as effective, but without the first read throw being there right away? And how quickly can he get to the second read? I think there's a lot of things that have been put in Sam's head about you have to play this way. Don't do this. Don't do that. And I think it's causing him a little bit of, I don't want to say it's anxiety, but it's happy feet a little bit in the pocket because he's trying to do all of it while still trying to diagnose what that defense is doing across from him and not creating a turnover and not putting the team in a bad position and not taking a bad sack, but it's okay to take a good sack. Like, it's a lot. And this is where I think, this is where coaches should alleviate this pressure. There should be things that Clint Kubiak can do to take some of that away from Sam's thinking process and go, hey, you know what, Sam, we're going to get you on more boots. We're going to put you out on the roll more in this game. And another thing would be the run game. Hey, we're going to lean into the run game a little bit, but they can't right now. Okay, so how are we going to do things? We're going to come up with more rub concepts in our quick game to create some confusion with the secondary so they're not just sitting waiting on routes and squatting on them like in the Vikings game, in the Rams game. Hey, if teams come up and press us, this is what we're going to do. These are our new checks that we're going to go to if teams want to come up and press JSN or Shaheed or Cooper Kupp. Coaches need to have answers for their players. The players then need to go and execute. And so if one of those parts of the equation is not working, you got to figure out why. And that's where I think there's some disconnect here with the Seahawks offense. So with that being said, I'm going to get into the chat right now before I ask the final topic of this show, and we get to that in a bit here. But I'll start going through some of these because you guys have been in here. It's been great already. So let's start here with I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Comes in with, hey, Bryce, I think we need to take a step back for a sec. Before the season, we were excited about just having an average offense and being a wild card team. Now we're fighting for the number 1 seed. Huge success. I agree. But I also look at it once we knew about, I'd say, week 7 of the season that this team could be special, your level of, expectations changes. And the thing is when the offense has been as successful as it was, you got to still be able to evolve. And that's the thing I'm looking for. I agree. Having an average offense in wildcard was the dream in the preseason. That's what it was the dream of. Now, when we're talking about a team fighting for a number 1 seed and potentially even going to a conference championship, if they can win a couple of games in the playoffs here, your expectations and your level of expectation changes with this team. I'm not going to take the step back because I look at it and I go, last year we were 10 wins and missed the playoffs. I don't think Mike Macdonald would say we need to take a step back in this situation. I'm not going to take a step back. I've said from the beginning of the season, I thought this team was a 13-4 record team. And I think they have every ability to be that team. They need to figure it out, though, on offense. Defense, I have no problem that our defense can hold a team to under 20 points. That's not a problem and a question for me. When you have a Super Bowl caliber defense, don't waste them. And we did that one time. I'll say that we did that one time in Seattle in 2012 because I think that 2012 team that lost to Atlanta could have won the Super Bowl that year when they played. I think it was Baltimore. The Baltimore Ravens were in the Super Bowl because that was the lights out game in Louisiana there. That team could have beat that Baltimore Ravens team in the Super Bowl. And then we would have been talking about going back-to-back, maybe a three-peat potentially in 2014. Don't waste Super Bowl caliber units. And this is where I hope our offense doesn't do that. But I appreciate the comment. I appreciate the perspective there, X-Wing. What else do we got in here? Amy Holmes comes in. Favorite play of the game, Demon Worry, not suplexing the guy he caught on the sideline. Yes, that was fantastic. He did not do that, Amy. I was holding my breath for a second there. Let's see, what else do we got here? And X-Wing goes, I never want to see that reffing crew again. I think that's one of the worst reffing crews I've seen in the NFL. And Mike alluded to that almost, I think, in his 710 show today, where he even said, he goes, there was a ref in the middle of the timeout sequence there where they took a bunch of timeouts at the end who just comes up and starts randomly talking to Mike Macdonald as he's calling the defense. And Mike was kind of like, I'm in the middle of calling my game, man. Like, piss off, basically. Like, he's like, I didn't mean to be rude, but like, I don't have time to talk to you, kind of a thing. So I agree. The level of competency of that reffing crew is definitely in question. What else do we got? Oh, here we go. Islam in here goes, to be honest, this team is not going to go far in the playoffs. Offensive line and run game are cratering at a bad time. People coming at AB so hard should also do the same at center. Running back spot also needs a revamp, to be honest. I agree with you, Islam. I think they can get through the first round. If they're a wild card team, they have to play round 1. I think they can get through that. Round 2 may be more difficult, especially with the trajectory of how this line and run game is going. I watched Anthony Bradford the entirety of, through the film. I thought he had another really good game. Honestly, I thought Anthony Bradford had another good game this week. His run blocking was actually better this game as well, surprisingly, considering how bad the run blocking was in general as a unit. But I think there's still questions to be asked about the running back spot. I know there's some people that are like, hey, we should go get Breece Hall. I think there's more now to look back onto those rumors that Tony Pauline came out with at trade deadline that Seattle was interested in Devon Achane from the Miami Dolphins, that maybe Seattle was sniffing around the running back market and trying to figure out, maybe not to trade at that particular moment, but maybe they were sniffing around to see, hey, what is it going to look like potentially in the offseason for guys like a Breece Hall or an Achane? What potentially, if we had to make a trade so they don't hit free agency and we just get them, what could that look like potentially? I think there's a good case that both those spots, guard, center, and running back, all three, I should say there, Islam, is probably a good chance they all get a hard look this offseason, especially if they turn out to be the Achilles heel of this team in the playoffs. Because the one thing we know about Mike Macdonald is he does not wait to fix a problem. He will fix it as soon as he can. Here we go. We got X-Wing Dispatch in here. Goes, yeah, the win might not have been pretty, but it's still one step closer to the island of Bryce and Mookie were right. and don't forget, John was on that island too. John McGrath, if he's in the chat, John was on the 13-4 island. But there's some things here I would agree with. Like we'll see what this team does. This Rams game to me is the biggest game the Seahawks have played, I think personally, since probably the 2014 NFC Championship game. And I know there's been a couple other, there's the game where Marshawn came back versus the 49ers. This team, though, feels like it's on the true point of reaching the pinnacle of finally being back to being one of the NFC West powers, being an NFC power, an NFL power. I never got the feeling with that Hawks team that played when they had to bring Marshawn back that year and Turbo. This to me feels like the biggest game in Seattle since the 2014 NFC Championship game against Green Bay. And that's saying something considering what we've gone through as a fan base and everything since that moment in 2014 where we did make it back to our second Super Bowl in a row. I think it needs to be so loud and lumen. I hope, to be honest, the weather's crummy and it causes Matthew Stafford issues. And I will say this. I have no worry that this defense is not going to come out with a massive chip on their shoulder and say, you know what, screw it. We're going to go win the game. We're not going to wait for anybody. We will just go win the game on our own if we have to. And, it'd be nice for the offense to match that intensity and do it the same. So it'll be interesting. We got CK Seahawk here. Have a feeling that we were looking past the Colts. I really think they're going to smoke the Rams. Just a feeling. I hope you're right. But as we know in the NFL, you should never really look past anybody. Like the Colts were a good football team. And, I was listening to a couple other, national media analysts today talk about the Seahawks Colts game. And the one thing that they applauded the Colts for, and I think this is an interesting point to think about, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard, I think, did a marvelous job in motivating their team this week. And the reason I say that is they trot out Riley Leonard or Brett Rippin. I think this might have been a blowout game. I really do. Because I don't think either one of those players instilled any confidence in those Colts players in that building. However, going and getting Phillip Rivers, the competitor that Phillip Rivers is, I bet you there are a bunch of players in that locker room that wanted to play super hard for Rivers, prove, after hearing all the things from everybody this, week about, Rivers is too old, he can't do this, he can't do that, hey, you know what? We're going to go shock the world. And it was kind of that extra motivational factor that you needed on the defense and on the offense. And, because considering that they were their offensive line was pretty banged up, we didn't get a lot of pressure on them. Now, there's questions to be had about why Mike Macdonald played a certain set on defense with the two high safeties and such. And I've heard some other Seahawks content creators talk about it. I think there was a argument to be made, and I know this may upset some Seahawks fans, even some in here. I don't have a problem that Seattle played too high for a chunk of this game. And the reason I say that is Phillip Rivers is a timing-based quarterback. And one thing he was doing well, even his last year in Indy, was getting the ball out underneath 10 yards quickly. I think Mike Macdonald looked at it and said, I'm going to see if Phillip Rivers can march the ball 80 yards consistently, drive in and drive out on those dink and dunk plays, and we aren't going to give him any hope of getting anything over the top. Now, I know Phillip Rivers couldn't throw it over the top even if he tried. And I think that's why you saw in that last play there, Mike finally decided to dial up a bit of pressure. He threw the pick to Kobe because he sailed it. I would have liked to see them roll down, a safety here or there into the box post snap on some of those run fits. But I understand the makeup. Now, there's one thing I will say that did bother me in this game, and I know some people were really excited to see him out there. Riley Mills got to play. He got activated, he got to play, and it was It was really good to see. But Riley Mills, watching him in this game, I trust me, I'm not saying that Riley Mills was unimpressive, but I feel like you almost set him up for failure in this for a guy that hasn't played in basically 9 months at this point almost, or just over that, coming off a very significant knee injury. We're not talking just like a basic ACL tear. Like, he tore everything. It was reconstructive knee surgery. To go in and play an NFL game with 3 weeks left in the season, 4 weeks, isn't easy. And he did not do well, especially because when he was in there for the 7 plays, the runs that they got were first downs or close enough to a first down every time he was practically in there. I didn't like the fact it limited Brandon Peely snaps in the game, because I think Brandon Peely is one of our better run defenders, at least at holding things up and creating, plugs in the run game. It's something to me where I wonder, okay, they gave him some reps now because it was the Colts. And now do they look at potentially he doesn't see the field maybe against the Rams? That's kind of something I wonder, and it'll be something to kind of look at here, going forward. What else we got? We got Brian Myers in here. He goes, upgrade to Job needed, in my opinion. Yeah, I think, you know what? I'll say this. I think there's a conversation to be had next year in training camp. If Job is back, he's battling with Nehemiah Pritchett for that corner spot out there, especially if they keep Reek and Spoon together. I think there's a chance that Pritchett may be the one challenging Job for that, or a draft pick. We got HMYIZ. I would pay Reek. And we got Islam here. Makes you wonder if the Seahawks being in rumors for Devon are really the type of running backs to make this offense really take off. I think it's that. And I think there's also something to be said here, guys, about Kubiak's scheme. And this is something, to really go and look at. If you're a film nerd, or not even a film nerd, but just a football X's and O's junkie, and you're kind of curious, go watch what the Rams used to do when McVay first got there with Goff and Gurley, and how when he got Stafford, they changed. And now they're basically, for a run game, I would call them a multiple run scheme, where they can run outside wide zone, but they can also run gap power really well. And he made that change when he got Stafford. And it's been really interesting to see that. And even Shanahan has started to do that, move more into an inside zone looking team than a wide zone all the time. And again, this is where I look at Kubiak and I go, he's a really good chef with his recipe. But can he take his recipe and elevate it? And right now, when he tries to do those things, he burns the shit out of the dish. And that's something that's just one of the things I have. Like, that's where it's like I look at, Kubiak, and I call him the B+ version of this offensive scheme. That's not a bad thing, but there's limitations to that type of, situation. And so that's where I wonder if he wants to be considered one of the better offensive minds in the game, which I think he can be. I do believe Kubiak can get there. He has to start figuring out ways to elevate things and get creative that way, because even Mike McDaniel, as much as he's down in Miami there and they've got all the other issues, he has been so good at taking it, what he learned from Kyle Shanahan, and elevating it down there in Miami. So that's something to look for with Kubiak in this offseason. I'm going to bring up PFF occasionally. I'm not going to stop talking about PFF. There are valuable pieces of PFF. Grades with PFF are always up in for question there, Russo, but it's not something I'm just going to stop talking about, because there's valuable intel that does come out of PFF. It's just, when you talk about grades, you can go, yeah, take a grain of salt with it, kind of a thing, if you're looking at it and strictly looking at the grades and not everything else that goes into it. There we go. We got Grease in here. I just think we need a couple of new backs, potentially. I think there is a conversation we had, and Brian comes in here. If Walker leaves, go after Breece Hall. Yeah, that was that's a conversational piece to have this offseason. Is Breece Hall a guy? And X-Wing brings this up. Doesn't matter who the back is if the line can't block properly. Agreed. Let's see. What else do we got in here? Outside of the 0 TDs, I thought the box score was fine outside of the running backs. Yeah, the passing part for sure, Brandon. Brendan, it was good. Like I said, the receivers and that whole group there really have started to come on in the Falcons game. We saw Shaheed get more involved. I was really good with that, and I'm really happy with that. I think that's something that we're seeing growth. Shaheed's getting more, built into the offense here, and it's good to see. The thing that was concerning today, I'll say, is the Torrey Horton way that news that kind of, you know, Mike McDonald didn't really say it, but this is something I've been feeling for a while. I think Torrey Horton broke part of his shin. Sorry, and I think that's why it's taking him so long and why Mike's still saying there's hurdles for him potentially to try and get back this year. If it was just a shin bruise, you're probably back already. If you cracked your tibia and they're just not saying that you've broken it, I think this leads to now why Seattle used the draft capital they did to go get Shaheed. I think this also, with the way Mike's talking, leads me to believe that this injury was way more significant than initially thought. And probably when he went out and tried to practice, I think it was a walkthrough or something, and he got it re-aggravated or got worse following that Commanders game, is he probably stepped and it started to crack more, and they've now shut him down basically. What do we got here? Oh, this is interesting. I'd rather be flying X-Wing talking with Brian there. I really hope Cable Duke can be the answer at guard after learning and growing for a year. I think he'll be part of the competition, guys. I do. I think he'll be part of the competition next year, so it'll be interesting. Let's see. What else do we've got in here? Let's have a look. All right. Okay, let's talk about this. Confidence for the Rams rematch. So I kind of want to get everyone's pulse here on this. How confident are you guys in this Rams rematch? I know CK Seahawks said he thinks that they're going to win and it's going to be all good, but the honest question I have here is, in comparison to when we lined up to play them in SoFi to now, are you more confident in the Seahawks team? Are you the same level, or are you actually a little bit more concerned about this matchup on Thursday? Because for me, I'm torn. Defensively, special teams wise, I'm very confident. I'm not concerned. I'm concerned more so about the offense than I was the first time around when we went into SoFi. And I'm actually more concerned about the offense, even more so than after that 4 interception performance than Darnold. Like, now that these weeks have kind of gone by, I am more concerned about that matchup this Thursday. So I'm kind of interested to see where you guys are at with this, because it's something for me where I think this game truly comes down, not even just to Sam and not turning the ball over. I think this is a huge, huge game for Clint Kubiak to prove he can beat somebody that understands his offensive philosophy. This is really, we talk about the Mike McDonald and Sean McVay matchup and the X's and O's. The Clint Kubiak, Chris Shula one is huge because Chris Shula is going to be up for a bunch of job opportunities. And there's rumors that Clint is too. And, this is really going to be a match of those two and to see who can actually get the best of who. Because if Clint can't beat this Rams defense and show that he can move the ball with Sam and with these guys, I think it's going to be hard for him to get an OC job. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what this offseason looks like for this offense okay, we had deficiencies. How do we address them from center to right guard to running back? How do we address these concerns that are present in this offense that held it back from potentially being more effective? Because that's going to be the $1 million question. So I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say in here. It's going to be very interesting. This is a good point from Russo here. Sam's always been a gunslinger, can't tie his arms behind his back. I totally agree. And this is something Brian talked about on Hawkblog, and this is something I feel the same way. Like, you can't put a million different things in this dude's head, any quarterback's head for that matter, unless you're Tom Brady. But the more you put on a quarterback to change how he is playing mid-season, the more you're actually doing to disrupt his overall flow and rhythm. Because every time he watches film, he may be hesitant going, okay, well, next time I get this, I can't do this. And that's where, you got to live with the good and the bad sometimes. We used to do it with Matt Hasselbeck all the time. Matt was a guy that would throw the occasional bonehead interception because he just ripped the ball in there. Brett Favre used to do the same thing. Now, I get that having multiple turnovers in a game can sometimes kill you, like it did for us versus the Rams. I don't think also going to throw another 4 interception game because he hasn't since. I think you got to let Sam, especially in this game on Thursday, let Sam go be Sam and scheme open some new stuff for him to get guys open rather than just relying on things the Rams are going to be expecting. That's your job as an offensive coordinator, and where I put more of it on Kubiak. What do we got here? We got Cameron in here. He goes, it's because this team has no run game. So it's all on Sam, and Kubiak can't scheme a third down conversation either. I think it means conversion. Either. No run game, third down issues is why we are still a year away. I think that's a fair assessment. I think, this is going to be as much of a growing situation for Kubiak as it is for Sam. And when you don't have the explosive offense or explosive plays, I should say, that we were living on in the first half to 3/4 of the season, can make it hard when those get taken away to muster up offense. And this is where they've got to figure out, okay, our right guard situation. Do we have anybody on this roster outside of maybe Cable and Richmond who we may still think are a year away that we can look at and be like, yep, these guys fit our scheme and personnel? Same at center. Are there guys there that we can look at and be like, do they fit our scheme and personnel? And that's where I really look at it and go, this is going to be another important offseason for Mike McDonald. What else do we got? Let's see here. We got Trey comes in. Hi, Coach. Do you think the Thursday night game will go versus the big bad Rams? I will tell you my prediction of that later this week on my preview show, but I think this game is maybe got a chance to go down as the best game in the NFL this season if all things come together for both teams, but it'll be interesting. We got this one from Greasy goes, I feel so bad for Pete. Yeah, that Vegas situation is I don't even know what word to use to describe that, to be honest with you. That I hope that does not tarnish Pete from getting an opportunity at being a first ballot option as a coach going into the Hall of Fame. But I wonder if, because it'll be so fresh, potentially it has that opportunity for it. I didn't even expect the Raiders to be this bad. I thought they were going to be at least maybe a middling 500 team. I didn't expect it to be this bad for them. And just the stories you're hearing coming out, it's really disheartening. So Wagons World, no, Horton is not playing on Thursday, and it sounds like who knows if he'll play again this season. What else do we got? There we go. John McGrath in the chat. Myers for MVP, 6 for 6, new Seahawks record. That man is money. He's just as valuable as anybody on this team. Myers has been good this year. I think this might actually, be Myers' best season, even though he did have a season going perfect in 2020 where he was 24 of 24. I think he's made bigger kicks this year in crucial times that sometimes I think Myers has missed. The interesting conversation, I'll say this, is does Myers, if he finishes this year with a couple more big kicks, does he jump Steven Hauschka as being one of the, and I know Hausch money won the Super Bowl, was phenomenal kicker for us, but does Myers go down as a better kicker when his Seahawks career is over than Hauschka? That'll be an interesting conversation to have. Fair point, Amy. John's ears were burning after I brought him up. Dennis is in here. A little bit more concerned about the defense not able to take advantage of 2 linemen being out. Yeah, but I'll say this, Dennis. Shane Steichen did a phenomenal job in game planning. He did things to limit the exposure of those guys that had to step in for those 2 linemen. So, yeah, I'm not worried about our defense in that situation. I think they'll be fine. And I think you didn't see as much DeMarcus Lawrence and Leo and some of the other guys as frequently because I think they were also trying to potentially not rest, but limit the exposure of those guys getting beat up on a short week, especially going into this matchup with the Rams. Amy comes back with Mafe is really disappointing to me. Yeah, Mafe has been a massive disappointment this year. He will, I don't see Mafe being back. This is actually a fair point. So, Brian, the flooding may affect fans going this week, may make more tickets available for opposing fans. again, thinking about all you guys down there in Washington dealing with the floods, it's definitely been a not an easy thing to deal with up here where I am, an area just east of where I am and Abbotsford and Chilliwack is kind of BC here has kind of gone through the same thing where there's been massive flooding and it's taking out farms and people's homes and stuff. So our thoughts and prayers are with you guys down there dealing with that as well. And I hope everyone that does watch this is safe and their family members are safe. So especially with the holiday season coming around too, it just isn't making anything any easier for anybody. So thoughts and prayers are with you guys. What else? Let's get into this. Let's just get into it right now. Let's get into the 12 talk. I'm just going to talk with you guys for the rest of the night. I've said my piece on how I feel about things with this offense and such. So let's get into this. What do we got here from John? Goes, Mike Macdonald said it best in his post-game show. This team is resilient. Great teams need to be able to win ugly games as well as blowout type games. The Seahawks are proving that they are becoming great. Exactly. And I think that's the key thing there, John. They are becoming great. I don't think they are there yet. I'm just looking here. Let me know if you guys still have me. I just had a weird glitch on my end here on my computer. Hopefully the wind up here hasn't knocked out my Wi-Fi. So let's make sure everything's good on that front. We got Brian here. Why don't Rams fans... We don't want Rams fans to affect our team, though, Space. This is just the type of game 12s complain about when they say, where are the 12s? And that's fair. And I think, this is a big opportunity for the Seahawks team, as much as it's a big opportunity for this fan base to come in and show it. And, I think that the fans have done a better job this year of that, to be honest. And there's been less and less talk of it this year, which has been great. This is going to be a key game to prove it, considering how close LA is. There are going to be Rams fans there. We know that. But we got to make sure we make the difference with the noise level in there and make sure Stafford and that group are not welcomed when they walk into Lumen Field. What else we got here? Just making sure. All right, we've got 7-7 Matic in here. It's your turn to shine, Seattle. My Rams suck in open stadiums. You must blow us out. No excuses. I don't know if it'll be a blowout, but the hope is that we can actually get things going in the right direction in this matchup with you guys, because as of late, you guys have definitely owned the matchup. I don't even count last year's end of the season game. That was more of a preseason game for these two teams. But if it's raining and it's miserable, I'm going to be very interested to see how Matthew Stafford handles that. He didn't handle it well in that Carolina game. It'll be interesting because it'll be a lot colder up here too, to see how Stafford and this group handles it. The other interesting thing too is, I know they said Puka came out of that game, with back cramps, I think he was dealing with, is what they called it at the time. Hopefully it doesn't turn into spasms and flare up for him, because I want to see Puka out there playing against the Seahawks. I know probably Devontae is not likely after what looked like it was a pretty bad hamstring pull for you guys in that Detroit game, but that's going to be another thing. Cold and, muscle cramps is never a good thing because they have a tendency to tighten up. I wouldn't be so sure about that, JT25. I wouldn't be so sure about that. I think there is a way Reek may be back next year with the way he's played down this backstretch. And one thing I think, that's been kind of interesting is how much him and Devin Witherspoon have been together outside of the facility and stuff. From what I've heard and seen on social media, I think Spoon almost took Reek under his wing to kind of get him refocused. And I think that's what we've seen through the second half of the season. Reek's been a much different player than he was in the first half. What else? Let's see. Feast mode comes in with, have the Hawks used fullbacks much this season? Feels like we saw a lot more of it in the preseason. Yeah, that's something that's interesting. They did for the first couple weeks until Robbie Oots' injury. he got injured, and then they kind of have never really gone back since he's got back. And I know he injured his elbow, but it seems like they've never really gone fully back to the commitment. And I think part of that too, if I'm going to be brutal honest, I think part of it was the Eric Saubert effect of his injury, because I don't think they looked at Brady Russell and Nick Callerup as value. Well, not that they're not valuable, but as proper replacements for Eric Saubert's blocking. And Arroyo was never going to be that blocker. So it'll be interesting to see now that Saubert's back, if Oots and Saubert are both active this Thursday, if we see more of that two-back situation come back with, Robbie Oots and Eric Saubert in there. Trey, I haven't looked fully into the draft yet. It'll be interesting for me down at Senior Bowl at the end of January when I'm down there with Dan and Brandon Kane and that, and we're doing our credentialed reporting down there for Senior Bowl. Running backs will be definitely a group that I'll pay attention to and see if there's any guys that stand out at the Senior Bowl, as well as some of the other positions. But it'll be an interesting thing to find out what this class of Seattle views it as a group. I know there's one running back I'd like them to take in this group, and that's Jonah Coleman out of Washington. And it is not just because he is a Husky. I think he actually fits what they want to do and what they want in a running back really well. But it'll be interesting to see what other running backs potentially could be options in this 2026 class. Mofo comes in with Mills matchup from the clips I've seen were against Nelson. I think we should calm down on the Mills hate wave. I don't think it's a hate wave. I think it's more of I just look at it from a perspective of, you're putting him out there. Who are you losing those reps from in a game when you knew a team was going to be running the ball? And when you're dealing with interior D linemen in running the ball situations against teams that are going to run it at potentially a higher click than normal, that's where you have to ask yourself, is that the best situation? Like, if they wanted to use Riley Mills, I would have put him in more on interior pass rushing situations to give him his reps than on the run downs that they put him in, because it's a lot harder for a guy to get in there and deal with. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Riley Mills going forward the rest of the season. We've got 7-7 Maticum. Seattle is the favorites at home. This is a must-win game. Skeptical Ram fan. I don't know if Seattle's the favorites, actually. I'm actually curious about that, because I saw somewhere that Seattle actually opened as the underdog, which would be surprising. Let's see here. Currently, the win probability is 50.3 for the Rams, 49.7 for the Hawks. And if I go to look at the matchup here, what does it tell me? Currently, the Rams are favored, and I think, the Rams are -1.5, and the Seahawks are +1.5 so far. So it's going to be close. It's going to be close, that's for sure. What else do we got in here? I'm not going to be too much longer, guys, as the weather here is getting not so nice with the wind and stuff, and I don't want to lose power midstream. Let's see here. We got M. Jordan. Hey, Bryce, is there a running back we could sign or currently on a team you would like to see get a few more carries instead of RB1 and 2? I'd like to see what Cam Akers could do. I know they put him back on the practice squad, but I'd be interested to see what Cam Akers could do in this group. When I look at next year, I'm intrigued by the Breece Hall thing or the Devon A-Chain thing. Like, I'm intrigued by that. I'm getting closer and closer to the idea that the running back that will carry the majority of Seattle's touches next year is not on the roster currently for the Seattle Seahawks. So it'll be something, and I know a few weeks ago I was very high on Ken Walker coming back, and I still think it's a possibility. But with what's going on with Kenny Polamalu, and now the running game's kind of falling apart, and the running game looks, and I get the offensive line is a big part of that, but there's going to be questions to be asked about, like, what more do we do to keep turning this pot with the run game to get it going? And I'm starting to wonder if it's something called the Marshawn Lynch curse, because we had the Max Unger curse at center, which we're still kind of living through a little bit. The center position's been a little bit better this year with Olu and Sundell. But ever since Beast Mode left after basically 2025 or 2015 there, sorry, I should say, we've struggled at the running back spot. And I know Chris Carson was here, but he was injury prone. And CJ Procise and Thomas Rawls. And Yeah, Rashad Penny. Like, we've had so many guys come through here, but it seems like every time we get a back that has some promise, either the line can't block or they become injury prone throughout that process. And I'll say one thing, as much as, the offensive line back in 2013 and 2014 were good, they weren't always the greatest run blocking units out there. They were good, but they weren't great. Marshawn made a lot of those guys miss in space, and think Marshawn just did different things. And I think it's one of those things. I'm not trying to say go find the next Marshawn Lynch, but it'd be nice if we could find a running back that could consistently stay healthy-ish, or at least be more effective that way. So it'll be interesting. Let's see here. What else do we got in this chat from you guys? There you go. Brian, Coleman equals David Montgomery. Yeah, I'd be okay with David Montgomery style of runner. I think that would be just fine in Seattle. What do we got here? Okay, I will keep my eye on Caden McDonald in this draft for sure. I will make sure to do a scouting report. Oh, there you go. Atlanta comes in. Just check the forecast. It went from no rain at game time to 20%. Now 50 degrees. Well, we'll see. He was waived, but he's back on the practice squad. Him and Shaquille Griffin cleared waivers and both came back to the practice squad. I agree. Carson was a great back, one of my favorites, but again, just could not stay healthy. What else do we got in here? He did have Mike Robb leading for sure, but there were times where Marshawn didn't have. I think it was 2014. Mike Robb wasn't on the team because I think they went to Derek Coleman for a bit at fullback, and then halfway through the season switched to Will Tukawafu. And then they became actually more of a single back based team for the back half of that 2014, 2015 kind of era there. Yep. Thank you for that, Brandon. Yeah, he basically did. All right, guys. Well, that kind of is going to wrap it up for me tonight on this show. And so, yeah, obviously short week here on the Hawks eye. So I don't know if we're doing a Hawks film lab with myself and Dan Vians, but however, on Wednesday night at 7:00, myself, Brandon Kane, Mookie Alexander, and Dan Vians will all be back for a live Seahawks Syndicate show, basically to get you guys all geared up and ready to go for the Thursday night matchup with the LA Rams. I will be doing a live preview show either before the Syndicate or before the game on Thursday. Maybe I'll try and hop on a little bit early and try and do that. I don't know if I'll be able to, so you might have to take the Syndicate show as the preview show this week, unfortunately. But I will be back either following the Rams game that night, or I'll be doing a live Aftermath show on Friday, potentially with Mookie Alexander joining me, as Michael Thompson won't be able to join me this week. So look out for those things. I will put it in the community post area on my YouTube page and let you guys vote if you want me to do one after the game on Thursday night, or if you guys would rather me just wait and do it the following, or on the Friday night, I should say. But outside of that, that's kind of what I've got coming up this week. Probably try and get some more interesting guests on over the week after, because we'll have a bit of a mini bye there leading into that Carolina game. So appreciate all of you being in the chat tonight and contributing to the comments and stuff. It was great interacting with you guys. And as always, stay loud, be proud, and go Hawks. Have a good night, everybody.